All right, Keeping It Rural listeners, thanks for tuning in to our latest episode. Once again, it's producer Loren jumping into the hot seat, and I've got a really fun guest today. So, Julie
Yes.
Fritsch is a creative and ag marketer, lived on a farm just about all your life, still work on a farm with your family. And today we're going to talk about ag communication, rural communication, and tapping into those careers and skills that aren't necessarily maybe always in person. It could be online, could be digital, and a different view, if you will, on how ag and rural life are impacted by a career that you and I both share in marketing. Julie, thanks for joining. And I do want to give you a chance to introduce yourself and expand on that. Tell us a little bit more about what you do and your background.
Sure. Thank you. And thanks for having me today. This is really fun. I love your podcast. So this is great. I am a full-time freelancer. I come from a rural and farm background, like you said, and probably about 7 or 8 years ago now, I decided to go out on my own full time. And I work with all kinds of different ag businesses and organizations, really to help them tell their story. A lot of times where I will come to an organization or they will come to me is at the point in their marketing when they know the message that they're trying to communicate. They usually have a pretty good idea of how it is they want to do that. And they know they want a website, or they know, they'd like a video or something like that. And then they come to me and I help them turn that into a reality. So I'm on the maker end of the process. I've had a pretty long career at this point in ag communications and in agriculture. And so I've been really fortunate to be able to gather a lot of different skills, whether it's photography or writing, which is really how I came into the industry, or all of the different things. And I know enough to be able to do a lot of different projects. And then over the years, I've also built a pretty good network of people who are really skilled, who are kind of specialists in certain areas. So I'm able to pull them in on projects as needed. I get to work with businesses of all sizes, everything from people who span the nation to folks that are on their farm and are trying to reach more like direct consumer kind of thing. So it's a lot of fun. I really enjoy what I do.
Awesome. And I'm looking forward to getting to the nitty gritty of your skills and diving into that and what all you can do and some of your favorite projects. But I do want to go a little bit deeper into your history in agriculture. What introduced you to it?
I'm a farm girl from day one. I grew up on a dairy farm in eastern Kentucky, right on the edge of Appalachia. So we milk maybe 60 Holsteins at the most, would be the most that would be in our milking herd at any one time. I loved growing up on the farm. We raised tobacco. We had all of the, what I would think of as regular small farm things, hay, silage, a few crops. And I knew that I wanted to stay in a rural area, and I knew that I wanted to be involved in agriculture. But growing up, it never occurred to me that I would actually be able to have a role working in agriculture. I thought at the most fortunate, I would be able to grow up and maybe marry a farmer and be a farm wife, which would be so exciting. I would love that kind of thing. But it never occurred to me that I could maybe have a career in that. I thought I need to find a career, and then I need to be able to live on the farm. Those were my goals in life. I never took ag classes. I was never in FFA, even though we had a lot of girls in FFA when I was growing up, and we had some great female ag teachers. It just, for whatever reason, I never made that connection. There were a couple of pivotal moments when I was growing up that kind of pushed me in the direction of like creativity or marketing and communications. I will never forget when our local radio station came out to our dairy farm for June Dairy Month and did a live remote. They set up in the front lot in front of our milk barn, and they were doing their radio show right there. And I thought, oh man, that is so cool. I want to do that. So I knew from an early age that I wanted to be in communications, but still wanted to stay in the ag space. And so was fortunate when I was in high school to get to go to a leadership program. It's called EIFL. It's through Kentucky Farm Bureau. It may be a national program, I'm not sure. But I got to go to the University of Kentucky's campus as a junior in high school. And again, I had never really had that kind of opportunity. And that's where I learned about ag communications. It was a thing. I didn't even know that existed before. And I thought, oh, okay, that is really what I want to do. I ended up going to UK, married a farm boy who was from Central Kentucky. We moved back to his family farm. We're raising a couple of kids. I've got a 12-year-old and a 16-year-old. We knew that we wanted to stay on the farm, but we also knew that his dad is a full-time farmer. The farm's not big enough to support two families. And so we knew going in that we would have outside jobs, but it was a conscious decision that we wanted to remain on the farm and be a part of that. So my husband is an ag teacher, and I've had several different careers, but it's been really important to us, and it's a great decision, I think, to stay connected to the farm. We raise beef cattle, we raise alfalfa hay. We're in an area that cow-calf is big, and also thoroughbred. The thoroughbred industry is really big here where we are. So we raise alfalfa hay and do just a diverse set of things, renovate horse pastures on horse farms and
Wow,
things like that.
okay.
So yeah, it's a lot of fun. Our kids show cattle, and so we're still very closely tied to the farm, which is so
Yeah.
lucky. That's exactly where I wanted to end up. So here I am on the days when I don't want to get out and do my chores. I'm like, this is what you wanted. This is what you wanted. So
Yeah, it sounds like your past self was largely in line with where you were going to go.
I was lucky, wasn't it? I guess. So yeah.
What led you to your current role when it comes to freelancing?
Sure. So my career path is atypical in the fact that I've had several jobs. So when I first graduated with my bachelor's in ag communications, again, I was connected to that Central Kentucky farm boy, so I wanted to stay close. My first job was as a 4-H agent. So I was a 4-H agent for a couple of years in Central Kentucky. I loved it. I wanted to be able to spend more time at home on nights and weekends, and that's when a lot of 4-H activities take place.
Yep.
So I transitioned to working for a large wholesale greenhouse because it was close to our farm. We were at the time, I want to say we were like 13 acres under glass, and it was all
Wow.
flowering annuals. So we sold to big box retailers like Lowe's. So I worked for this wholesale greenhouse on the business side of things. I got to learn a lot about not only flowers, but trucking and logistics and just business in general, which is not something I had a good background in. And it was great. I really enjoyed that. But in the whole time that I was doing these different jobs, I was also freelancing on the side because I love, again, I love to make things. I love to do things. It's just that process of creation that really gets me excited. So I would freelance for the Lexington paper, or I would design things for people or build websites. Anytime there was a communications oriented job where I was working, I would volunteer. Oh, I'll do the annual report, or I can build a website for us, that kind of thing. And then probably what I would think of as my incredibly fortunate break came when I applied for a job with the National Association of Agricultural Educators as a communications and marketing coordinator. So up to that point, I had been working in agriculture, but not really in communications. And so this was my first opportunity to really bring all of that together. So I stayed with NAAE for 10 years, went from communications coordinator to communications and marketing director. We were a very small staff. It wasn't like I actually transitioned anywhere. I guess I just didn't think that I deserved a title change. And I loved that job. I got to travel all over the United States. I got to meet ag teachers everywhere. I've been to ag programs that are in Queens. I've been to ag programs that are in the most rural part of Iowa. Just got to see so much of the United States. If anybody has been through an ag ed program, they can probably attest to this, but agriculture teachers are just the best. Not only do they love ag, but they are by nature kind and supportive and encouraging. And they were all of those things with me. And I loved my job with NAAE. This point in my life, my kids were getting bigger, the farm was getting busier, and I wanted to be home more. I traveled a lot. And so I was looking around thinking, okay, how can I make all these pieces work? I know I love to be creative. I know I want to be home. I know I just, here are the pieces that I want my life to look like.
Uh-huh.
What can I do to fit that?
Yeah.
And in my role at NAAE, I was really fortunate to be able to see, okay, where is the need in what I do? What is it that I'm always needing? And so it seemed like I could always find people who were willing to help me plan and who were willing to help like consult and think about the big picture. But where I was really having a hard time was finding the actual people who could do it,
Do the
like
work.
execute the plan, you
Yep.
know, build the website, design the graphic. That was where it was a struggle for me to find a person who both had the understanding of this is how we want to communicate and okay, I can make this for you. It's the marriage of those two things. And I thought, if I'm having trouble finding this person or these people, then maybe that's an opportunity. And so maybe I could do that. I again had always had a little finger in the freelance world, just a little bit. And I thought, okay, maybe if I can build that up and see if I can eventually go out on my own. And I just decided, okay, I'm going to start in January 1 year, and I'm going to give myself until the end of June, and I'm going to see if I can build my business to the point while I'm still working at NAAE to be able to say, okay, I think I can do this on my own. So I looked around. I reached out to two potential clients. One was a guy that I went to high school with. His family owned a small chain of feed stores. I just reached out and said, hey, could you use some marketing help? And he said yes. And so I got two clients. And it was really important to me because I loved my job at NAAE and what I did that I continue to do just as good of a job at NAAE while I was building this business. So
All those sleepless nights, right?
yeah,
Those Photoshop nights.
it was. So I talked with my husband and my kids who were pretty little at the time. We still talked about it. And I would do my NAAE gig during the day, travel or do whatever. And then I would come home, fix supper, get the kids settled in. And then I would go out to my office here at the house from 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock at night until 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning every day for 6 months, every night, every weekend. And it worked. It didn't work in 6 months. It was like October instead of June when I was able to go. But I can do that now. I was glad I did it when I was a little bit younger because I need a little bit more sleep now. Just was so incredibly fortunate to have people who said, okay, we'll give you a shot. And okay, we know you work weird hours. We're willing to give it a try for a few months anyway. And so it worked. And so by the end of that time, I was able to transition to working completely freelance on my own. Incredibly fortunate. My husband is an ag teacher, so he has a very stable job with stable benefits, and that helps.
Stable seasons and
Yeah,
exactly.
exactly. We have a farm, so we knew that okay, if your freelance income isn't quite cutting it, then we have the farm. It was all of those kind of pieces that had to fall into place. I left my full-time job and just never looked back. It's been fantastic.
What a story for sure. It's a great example too of more of those relationships and connections that happen a lot in the rural and ag world, at least from my experience. A lot of it was just conversation on your part where you're able to reach out to people or you were able to have spontaneous interactions for people who inspired you, which led to your current role. But one thing that I do wonder about, and I know that in marketing, every day looks different. There's not really like a set schedule, unlike with ag teaching, where there might be a little bit more of a formal approach. But when you went into it, what did you think it was going to look like, and how did it change?
A couple of things that have surprised me, probably in a good way. Early on, I thought, okay, people are going to know what they want, and they're going to send me a project, and I'm going to do it. I'm going to send it back to them, and then that's it. It's never that smooth. It's never that clean, for lack of a better word. You think that you're going to be able to just say, okay, well, I'm just going to design this brochure or I'm just going to do this website. But probably my curious nature and my want to really connect with people has caused me to, on a lot of projects, say, okay, I see what you're asking me for, and I see what it is that you want. Have you thought about this? It leads me to ask questions, which has actually been a good thing because then it leads to more effective communication. It doesn't necessarily change the project in a big dramatic way, but I think small changes can help make it better. But it's taken a lot more communication and thoughtfulness on my part than I thought that it would. I thought it would be very straightforward. And I think that has led to the other part of what has surprised me. Going out on your own is scary. You think for every day for the first 2 years, I thought, okay, we're probably going to starve to death. We weren't. It was going to be okay. But I would think, okay, I'm finishing this up, and then probably I'll never work again, and we'll probably just
Wind her
lose our
down,
house and
call her
everything
good.
else.
Yep. And then we're, yep.
Yeah, that's going to be it. But it hasn't. One thing is, I really underestimated how quickly you max out as a single individual person on the amount of work that you're able to take on. And so it's not like you have to go find this endless well of clients. You take on jobs and you do those to the best of your ability. And the next thing you know, weeks and months have gone by and you're living, you're doing it. That has been a surprise. And you don't have to go and really beat the bushes and constantly find all of these people or businesses that you were unaware of before, because you do a project and then maybe they have another project, or maybe somebody calls you out of the blue and says, hey, I saw what you did for so-and-so. Could you do something like that for us? And kind of back to what you were saying about that network where the community of agriculture, the community of rural people really has activated around me for whatever reason. And I've been incredibly lucky to have met people, who, for whatever reason, have said, all right, we'll give you a shot. And it's gone from there. So that has been surprising to me, probably in the very best way.
That's fantastic. You made me think of a little bit of a question around that instinct or curiosity for basically when a project needs poked or prodded, or you sense that there's something different. Can you talk a little bit about developing that? Because I think a lot of times we miss the conversation around building a skill set and an instinctual understanding of something over time.
This has taken me a long time to figure out or to be able to articulate. It was something that was natural to me because I'm just a generally curious person and I love stories and people's stories. But it took me a long time to realize that creativity and curiosity and really understanding what it is that we are trying to communicate, all of those things are skills that you have to build and put time into, just like Photoshop or just like getting really good at photography. If you are constantly if you're constantly trying to push out your product, your writing, your graphic design, but you're never putting in, then after a while, the well's going to run dry or it's going to diminish a little. I think that creative people love connection, whether that's through reading. I usually have 2 or 3 books going all the time.
Same.
I read everything from nonfiction books about logo design to biographies or beach reads or murder mysteries or all the things, because I love I get something from everything that I take in. And sometimes it might just look like I just need some time to be around in the world and not be producing something. I was just on a trip last week, wasn't able to get a flight out until later in the afternoon. I sat in my hotel room and did some work that I needed to do, but then I just got out and I did some exploring and looked around and saw what I could see. It sounds fun and fluffy and all those kinds of things, but that kind of stuff is important, that reflection. And then the third piece of that, I think, is really when you're meeting someone, really cultivating that skill of trying to listen to what they're telling you, just hearing what they're saying, not in the context of what they're saying around your project or what they're saying and then how you can respond to that, but really what they're saying, where that's coming from, what it is, how it is we can connect, because that grows in how they might be able to connect with their audience. To be a good communicator, you have to be a good listener, because you can't help somebody share their story unless you are hearing their story. And unless you have listened to what even their audience, their intended audience, unless you've listened to those folks and understood what resonates with them, how can I talk to somebody if I don't really have at least a basic understanding of what appeals to them or what will reach them? So all of those kinds of things have been 5 years ago. I would have been like, okay, whatever. That sounds very, again, fluffy, but it's important. It really is important.
And based off of that, what tools are you finding that help you with those relationships?
A couple of really concrete things that have helped me. I'll say one thing that has allowed me to do my freelance business from where I am is good, solid internet. I know that sounds
Oh, yeah.
very basic. Probably to somebody who lives anywhere near an urban center, they're like, whatever. I could not do it without good internet. And I have not always had good internet. I think that is a challenge that so many people in rural areas face. And a couple of years ago, we were able to get Starlink, and it just revolutionized everything that I was able to do. Before, if I had a meeting on Zoom or if I had to upload a big file, I'd have to leave my house and go to town. And it was getting to the point where I thought, okay, I'm going to have to rent an office in town and do that. So the most basic, good cell phone signal, those are the kinds of tools, but having those has given me more time to try to develop that other side of those skills. One of the things that has been really important in helping me continue to push myself as a freelancer, develop as a professional, is professional organizations. So I belong to AAEA, American Association of Ag Editors. I think I got the acronym wrong, but anyway, it's a great
Pretty close.
It's a
We love our A's in ag. We gotta have so many of them.
all the acronyms. But belonging to a professional organization has been really critical, because the access to other people who do the kinds of things that I do and who face the kinds of challenges that I have been, they're right there. It's at your fingertips. Anytime you need a little, you have questions. Also, just, I'm very much an introvert, which is probably why I was attracted to a job where I thought that I would just be sitting behind a computer making stuff all day. But pushing myself to meet new people, connect with new people, have those conversations, pushing myself to read about anything that goes into how people tick, why people do what they do, why people think what they think. Those kinds of things I have found to be really beneficial. I love to listen to interview style podcasts where people just share their story, because in that you can really get a lot of insight about what resonates with people, what motivates people, that kind of thing. So those are some things that I have found to be really helpful for me.
Awesome. And thanks for sharing on that. I do want to go a little bit more into the ag side of AgComm. What are some of the unique aspects that come to mind for you when you hear AgComm, and of course with your experience that you found with AgComm?
So I love the concrete nature of ag communications. It's communications, so we get to write, we get to illustrate a point about a very concrete thing most of the time, and about what I think is a very important thing. So whether that's food or fiber or the environment or whatever it is that we are communicating, I love the fact that I get to do the things that I love to do, which is be creative, but I get to do it about something that is not only concrete, but something that I'm very passionate about. And so when I think of ag communications, I think all the way back to when I first learned what ag communications was. That is what has always appealed to me. It's that we not only get to write, because that's where I really came into the industry, was through writing. Like, you not only get to write, but you get to learn all this stuff about agriculture too. And so to me, when I think ag communications, that's what's great about it.
You have to communicate with a lot of different groups when it comes to ag comm. So one day you could be working on something targeted at co-ops, another could be farmers. Day after that could be national organizations or working with ag teachers. How do you approach communicating topics through your business? Do you have a mindset, a framework?
For me, it really comes down to understanding. And sometimes that's research on its most basic level, demographic research. Who are these folks? What types of communication outlets do they generally use? What kinds of messages are they going to hear? You know, are these farmers in a rural area that has a strong radio station? Then maybe it's radio ads. Are these folks who spend a lot of time on social media? Maybe it's social media. When I think about communicating to different groups, I think the group comes first and then the method comes second. Is it a website? Is it an article? Is it a video? How are we going to reach these folks?
Yeah, I think about some of the work I've gotten to do with farmers, and usually the resonating message, it's not going to come from social media. They might see it on there, right? But it's at least from what I've dealt with, it's not as likely to connect as straight up an extension agent or finding a way to be in the conversation at coffee at the diner.
Yeah, a trusted partner, absolutely. That is a really big deal to find a lot of with those groups. I'll never forget that chain of feed stores I was talking about. It's one of my first clients. They were having an event and they needed RSVPs.
Mhm.
And we had sent out this message and they could text back to say that they were coming. So they could respond by text. We launched it about 2 days into the campaign. We got a call from one of the guys at one of the stores and said, do not ever do this again. He's like, I have helped so many guys text from their flip phones today that I cannot do this anymore. So understanding who your audience is, how they communicate, what resonates with them, that is really important to the success of your communication.
Or what tools they use, it sounds like. That's one, not quite failure, but learning opportunity. What's a
Yeah.
success story when it comes to reaching one of those groups?
Gosh, it's hard to say this has been a success. To have kind of the distance from that or the time from that to say this was a success is hard. But there have been some projects that I have felt really good about working on. One of them that comes to mind is for a client, they were celebrating their 100th anniversary and they wanted to just plan a big party. And so they pulled me in to help them figure out kind of the different pieces of this and the elements that we would include. And we planned, gosh, probably for 8 or 9 months. And they ended up having this outdoor community event. We did everything from fishing tournaments to a lot of kid-oriented kinds of stuff, to pulling in local groups for entertainment and for ag education type purposes. We had ag displays and those kinds of things. And I don't know that it grew their client base, but as far as growing their brand and kind of changing the conversation around how they were positioned in the community, and it just was such a great event from start to finish that it was just so fun to be involved in something like that. And so not super measurable in the normal kind of metrics you think of, but just a fantastic event that I was so excited to be a part of. That was a lot of fun. I think at the end of the day, sometimes it is about impression metrics and it is about dollars and return on investment and all those kinds of things. That's really important. But sometimes it's about building your brand and are we communicating in a way that makes us feel good about what we're doing and helps tell our story in a very clear way that connects with the people that we want to connect with. And so I think that there's real value in that, even though it's not as easy to prove on a spreadsheet.
Exactly. It goes back to that physical connection that you talked about a little bit versus just digital, which is another aspect of rural and farm life that remains strong even in the face of Starlink and satellites. I did want to get into a little bit more of a unique topic, which is innovation, or maybe a better way to phrase it is change. How do you approach change in your role, whether that's from a tool standpoint or just what you're working on?
Sure. I think that, and this is just me, because again, I do work in a little bit of a vacuum. So it's hard for me to look around at the industry and understand, but my job is change. If I'm not keeping up with or am at least aware of new tools and
Mhm.
what is coming down the pipeline, then how am I going to communicate with people who are immersed in that? So AI is a really good example.
Intelligence for our
Yes.
ag
Oh,
listener.
yes. I'm sorry.
Not
Yeah. Intelligence. Yes. The other AI is pretty well established, but
yeah, we know that one.
that's right. Artificial intelligence on the communications, like creating communication side of things, it's absolutely everywhere.
Mhm.
From writing to graphic creation to all of those kinds of things. And so it's something that as a person who creates, I need to understand what it is, how to use it, how to integrate it, how to use it to our benefit,
Mhm.
and not in a way that diminishes communication or in a way that would cause us to lose that personal connection. To do that, I need to embrace it, understand it, and integrate it into what I'm doing. The other thing is people change. The messages that they hear change.
Mhm.
I mean, I'm sure we've all heard about everybody's attention span is getting shorter and shorter. Folks are getting more and more divided on as far as being in their different areas that they're interested in. But I also think that people are able to connect with one another in ways that they've never been able to connect with one another. I think that people, especially younger generations, I see a lot more empathy or desire to understand
Mhm.
where other people are coming from. I know when I say that, there'd be a lot of people who think, I have heard the opposite of that. But if you really look around and talk with people, I do think that desire is out there. Understanding all of those trends and understanding the environment and trying to speak into that through whatever way you're communicating, all of that is really important. Understanding the climate, like the environment, understanding what is it that people need to be reassured about right now?
Mhm.
What is it that people are curious about right now? How can I address that through the lens of this farmer who's trying to promote his CSA? Or what appeals to people right now visually? That's a more concrete thing. How can I tie into those trends? But instead of trying to sell Nikes, I'm trying to encourage people to look at this farmer for their specialty grain or whatever it is. Life is
Yeah.
innovation. So I guess it's just all around you all the time.
Can't avoid it.
That's for sure. It's something that I enjoy, that I like, and I like to keep up on it. It's funny because at times you'll hear me say things like, oh, I hate social media or those kinds of things. So I think it has as much to do with connecting with people and with ideas through a lot of different channels as it does with keeping up with the big hot headlines. It's understanding what's flowing underneath of that. And again, what people are curious about, what their concerns are, how can we address those in the context of whatever it is that we're working on.
You're basically reading my mind again when it comes to the next question on those trends. Where do you think AgCom is going in the next 5 years? What are the big impacts? You touched on artificial intelligence briefly. Are there others? What's your vision?
I work in a space with a lot of medium to small
Mhm.
size clients. So they might be big farms, they might be organizations. And so I think it's becoming easier and easier for those size businesses to reach their target audience directly
Mhm.
because there's this great kind of equalizing effect. You don't have to take out thousands and thousands of dollar ad in this big newspaper in order to be heard. You can reach people directly, whether that's through social media or your website or direct marketing, being an influencer and being out there and talking to folks in the community. So I do think that you're going to see this continued trend of those mid-sized kinds of businesses and organizations. Their communication is going to get more and more effective. I think as artificial intelligence tools and easy creation tools, like things like Canva or like those kinds of things, I think that it's more accessible to more people to create. Maybe I'm not a trained journalist, but I can get a pretty decent story started in Chat GPT for whatever reason, and then take it from there. Along those same lines, I think that there is the potential to see some of the quality of that communication diminish a little bit because I'm making social media graphics for my company, but I'm not a graphic designer, or writing stories, but I'm not a writer, those kinds of things. I think that's okay. If we're reaching people where they need to be, with the message that they need to hear, that's okay. That being said, I still think that there is a ton of room for a professional communicator, whether that person is a professional, or whether that's in the visual realm, the world of writing or spoken communication, because you may not be able to put your finger on why it's more effective, but it's just that it is. And that's coming from a person who is trained and who's thought about all these kinds of things. So I think that there's room for both. I don't think it's a zero sum kind of a thing. I think that we're both going to see a growth in folks taking on more marketing tasks on their own, but then you're also going to still have plenty of room for those communications kinds of professionals, either to step in just because there's just not enough hours in the day for folks to do stuff, or because they want something just a little bit different. They're not quite figuring out why they're not getting the results they want.
Yeah, the value of that expertise, the experience you're bringing to the table. I think about, I got to run some ads for a soybean focused organization on Facebook. And one thing Facebook likes to do in ads is recommend alternate text. So you can have a couple different versions of your post floating around. And normally it reads pretty well, but it was just convinced this time that it had to use a wheat emoji for a
Yeah.
soybean organization for a post that referenced soybeans directly. Just could not be convinced otherwise. And if you're not used to it, or if you're just going through and selecting all of the default options that they recommend, then voila, you've got a post going out with a wheat emoji next to a soybean reference. And so getting up that training and experience is something that really interests me when it comes to AI, but also I really like what you touched on with maybe those who aren't experienced but want to get in the game, just have that chance. There's a lower bar of entry for any of it. With that, though, if somebody's going into their college career and they want to get involved in AgComm, with all this change going on, what would you recommend to them? How should they approach it?
I think that for somebody who wants to go into communications, I do think that a bachelor's degree is probably the way to go. Find a good program, get all of the experience that you possibly can, internships. And then I would say for somebody who is recently graduated and is either in that first job or looking for that first job, my advice would be on two fronts. So, one, find something that you really like to do in communications and get really good at it. Do you like to write? Then become a really good writer. Take the extra courses, take the extra time to really hone your skill. And then when you really feel good about that skill, find the next thing that you really like to do and get really good at that and build your skill sets. And then I think the other thing is just, and this I guess would apply across the board, you are always going to find success if you're a person who shows up and is ready to work and reliable and relatively pleasant to get along with. You're even if you have to fake it till you make it on that part, but just be a solid person. who is curious about the world. And even when you don't feel like it, be engaged. And even when the project seems dumb or the feedback seems unwarranted, take it in and just keep going. And in ag communications or in the creative space, you do have to develop a little bit of a thick skin because you are making something and you're handing it over. And there's a potential there for the person to say, that's not very good. But that can hurt a little bit. And so developing that ability to take feedback and to continue on and to continue to improve, I think is so important. And it's not easy. So I think if I had any advice, that would probably be it. Just be happy. And if you're not happy where you are, and I don't mean happy every day, you're not gonna be happy every day, but if you're not on fire about what you're doing, find something else to do. There's plenty of jobs out there.
So be a consistent human, be the human you want to be after you've had your coffee.
Yes, coffee is very important. Yeah.
Awesome. Julie, this has been great. We only have a few more questions that I want to wrap up with. And the number one question that came to mind for me that I was curious about is what do you want to do next? What are your big plans for 2024? Is there anything from your side that you're jumping into?
One project that I'm really excited about that I'm working on this year is I have continued to be connected with the National Association of Ag Educators, still do work for them. And this year they have a National Teach Ag Day, which is the third Thursday in September every year. This year it's September 19th. And so this year on National Teach Ag Day, they're actually going to premiere a documentary, a short 30-minute documentary that we're in the process of creating right now. And so we're following the journey of two students who are becoming ag teachers. Right now, they're student teaching. So when I said I was out of town last week, I was actually in Pennsylvania with a camera crew following one of the students at his high school where he's student teaching and working with his cooperating teachers and doing all those things. And we're going to follow their journey from student teaching through getting their job, interviewing and doing all those things this summer, and then their first few days in the classroom. And so it is just a ton of fun. I get to work with some really talented video folks on this, and then my role in this is more of a project manager and get to meet just all kinds of cool people. We're following a young lady in Kentucky and a gentleman in Pennsylvania on their journey, and just so fun. I'm so excited about that project. It's going to be a lot of fun. So that's one thing that's taken up a lot of my time this year.
I would think so.
Yeah.
Looking forward to seeing that premiere, that's for sure. Maybe we'll have to share the link out on the Keeping It Rural page.
Yeah, absolutely. That'd be really cool. On the farm, we're going to be busy too. Our family and farm is a big part of what I do. I like to go on and on about ag communications, but my daughter's showing similitudes this summer, and my son's a junior in high school and getting ready to go to college. So that's probably what's going to be keeping me busy in 2024 too. Is taking care of hay, beef cattle. It's going to be a big part of it too.
Each one of those could be its own full plate, right?
It could be. It could be.
Awesome. We wrap up every conversation the same way. How do you keep it rural?
That is a great question. I feel like it's just all rural for me, but I think for me, when I think, boy, this is really the space I want to be in, is when I'm out in the community and I'm connecting with other people who that same sense of that personal connection. And we are doing things to improve our community. We're being involved on the Farm Bureau board or the school fundraiser, whatever it is, because we care about our community. We want to make it better. We want to see our kids thrive. And to me, those are real rural sensibilities. Whether you are in a place that is, sparsely populated, or you're in more of the suburbs or something like that, those are the things to me that kind of embody those rural sensibilities. I guess that's how, just by continuing to be a part of my community, continuing to care about agriculture and the next generation that's coming into it, and just being open to having those conversations with pretty much everybody.
I think those are words that we could all learn from, that's for sure. All right, Julie, we are so grateful that you came on Keeping It Rural today. For anybody who wants to learn more, they can check out your website, which we'll link to in our podcast description. Keeping It Rural listeners, this has been Julie. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure to listen in to our next episode coming up.
It's not a party without you there. Follow our crazy on Facebook and Instagram, and be sure to check out all episodes and extras at keepinitruralgirls.com.
Until next time, keep it rural.
It's time to pour on the fire and call in the dogs. That's all, folks.